In this podcast, I'm going to be talking about me growing disinterest in the Nicholson bench and pretty much me just missing the Roman workbench. So with that statement, you might just say to yourself, Dave, why don't you just use the Roman workbench and stop being an idiot? On the surface, that's what it looks like, but underneath the surface is issues with me back. So the whole reason I started using the tall bench was just to alleviate pain in my back. So I've spoken about this a number of times, but I've got damage to three of my vertebrae. And even my lower vertebrae, I have a herniated disc or a bulging disc. It's one or the other, which has been causing the sciatica for the past 6 months. So anyone that's had sciatica, back pain, they know it's no fun. So I've tried to come away from the Roman workbench, and if I'm honest, I'm missing it. I'm missing the workability of it, and the Nicholson bench, I'm just growing more and more and more disinterested with it, just the way it's working. And I think one of the problems is that I worked on the Roman workbench for a lot of years, and I got quite proficient at working on it. I know how it's going to react. I can do everything on it. I pretty much taught myself how to do everything on this bench. That's probably why I like it so much. Don't get us wrong, I'm not saying the Nicholson's a bad bench. It's a good bench in its own right. I just feel that I'm growing more and more disinterested, and for a lot of tasks, I'm actually wanting to go back onto the Roman workbench, but I'm restricting myself from doing so just for my back health. One of the main things that annoys us with the Nicholson bench, and again, this is just preference, I'm not trying to have a dig at it, it's just, as I said, I've spent a lot of time on the Roman workbench, and again, each to their own, and this is my own and it's my preference. One of the biggest things is that I kind of clamp to the underside of the bench. Now, with the Roman workbench, obviously, very, very common. If you look at all my older videos of me using a Roman workbench, if I wasn't using the hold fast, quite common for us just to use a quick release clamp and clamp whatever to it, the workpiece to it, maybe 1 or 2 clamps. It's so efficient, and I really, really like to do that with it. But obviously, if you look at the Nicholson bench, I've got a 9-inch apron. It ain't happening, you know, and that's one of my biggest gripes with it. I really don't like it. Another thing I don't like about the Nicholson bench compared to using the Roman workbench is the weight of it. Now, you may be saying to yourself, but Dave, surely the Nicholson bench weighs more than the Roman workbench, and you would be correct, it does. However, again, if you check all my older videos, I was primarily using the Roman workbench outside on grass and soil, which basically means you put a little bit of weight on the Roman workbench, it gets its footing in the grass or the soil, whichever, a little bit of compression, and that thing ain't going anywhere. And the very few times it did move, it's just nice and easy for me to put an eye on it. Let's just say I'm planing, I can easy plane it like so with one knee on it. It's not an issue, other than for me back, of course. So it's pretty much a given that if I was to use it in here, it would slide all over the place unless I was putting weight on it. But I find that's the issue with this, is that when I'm planing, it will move about a bit, and it really annoys us because I'm not used to benches moving about when I'm planing. So I have actually got an under shelf, and it has got some power tools on it, the very few power tools I have got. But it's not enough weight. So the only other thing I could do would be to put some sort of weight on it. The bad thing about that is that I'm taking the use of that shelf away. So behind the camera, there's some beech. Beech is really, really heavy. And if I wanted to, I could stack the beech onto the under shelf, and it would weigh it down quite well. It would struggle to move, to be honest. But if I do that, I've got to find a new home for all these power tools, which in this little shed, every little nook and cranny is basically being used just about. The only thing that's not being used is the space between these the roof joists, and that's only because I haven't got around to insulating it and putting some boards on it, which I should really get done before the winter time. But you know, here, well, let's see how we'll go with that. Another thing that I miss about the Roman workbench is the peg setup. So I do use pegs on this bench, but because it's a tall bench, you can't utilize the same sort of formation of pegs that you've got on a Roman workbench, the same as on the Nicholson bench. Basically, the majority of the holes are in the center. It's quite busy around the center, whereas a taller bench, or at least this bench, it's more, the holes are more segregated to the edges. So the good thing about the Roman workbench is that, or at least what I think, you basically get a board in the middle, get it clamped up with the peg and wedge system, and I can plane away. So the thing about this, even if I'm standing and doing it, just my position, my body position where I am, that is if you're watching us on YouTube, if you should be listening to us, I'm basically standing over the Roman workbench, and just where I drop my hands, I'm slightly off centre of the bench, so it's not too much of an effort for me to put my knuckles in line with the centre of the bench. Now, if I try to do that at a tall bench, it's very restrictive for me to try and get into the centre. So again, for those of you that are listening, I'm actually bent over having to be in the centre, and this is really bad posture. Not to mention that I'm not going to be able to use my legs to the fullest to get momentum and strength to actually plane a piece of wood or whatever I may be doing. So even if I bring it to the edge, just the way me body's positioned, my hips are actually hitting the top, and I think again, this is just one of those things with a tall bench that I don't like. Same again, just because I've been using a low bench for such a long time. So my hips actually hitting the top of the bench here, whereas here I don't have to worry about my hip. So where my hip is, it's ever so slightly lying over the top of the Roman workbench. So it allows us to get my body over the Roman workbench, and I'm not bent over and such. So again, nice and easy for us to plane. With the Nicholson bench, you can probably see that I haven't got a vise on it. I'm not against vices. I love vices. I had a vise on my last bench that I made, which was a sawhorse bench. That was an adjustable vise. It went all the way around. I could pretty much position it anywhere on the bench, which was pretty cool. But vices for me aren't the be all end all. Don't get us wrong, they're very, very useful, and I'm not shunning vices. But one thing I must admit I do miss is the notch on the Roman workbench. And for those of you that aren't familiar with a Roman workbench, basically the Roman workbench, most of them, or at least everyone I've ever built, has a notch in it, and this gets used in a similar fashion as a vise, and basically it gets locked up with a wedge. You put the workpiece in there, put the wedge in, give it a few taps with the mallet, and it's locked into place. I did make a notch accessory for this, and I do like to use that when I'm using a Roman workbench, which is, you know, pretty cool. Sticking with work holding, when I'm working on this, work hold wise, I do feel a bit restricted using the Nicholson bench compared to using the Roman workbench. Again, that just might be a bias to me in the fact that I've just used this and utilized this to death. You know, I'm not trying to be big-headed, but you name a task and I can do it on this little bench. So there is a few issues with it, or at least issues I have. I'm pretty sure there's some of you guys out there that have Nicholson benches and you absolutely love them. Again, I'm not trying to, you know, put these benches down. They're time tested, you know, they've been used for hundreds of years. You know, there's a reason they've been used for hundreds of years. As I said, it's just a growing disinterest for me. So what should I do? The logical thing for us to do would be to go back onto this bench, but obviously I've explained my reasons why. Obviously my back issues, so I don't want to go back to this full time. I do still use it for certain tasks, but I just don't want to go back to it full time and risk like setting me back off again. So another logical step would be to kind of get this into this. Basically get the Roman workbench and make a taller Roman workbench. So again, there's some caveats with that. So some of the issues that I have with this tall bench would still transfer over to this tall bench, which obviously it could be an issue and it might be a waste of time for me to actually try to do that. So it stands to reason that if I'm going to kind of try and get the Roman workbench and make a taller Roman workbench, what would I do with it? In the terms of, should I make a Rabu style type of bench, or another sort of bench where I can get access through the apron, basically meaning that there is no apron there. One of the ideas I was thinking about doing was to make another sawhorse workbench, but I don't know if this is going to be a good idea. I don't know whether I should just persevere with this bench, try and, you know, get creative with it, maybe drop the height of it a little bit. Another issue, if I do decide to make another bench, is that I'm going to have to go out and buy the materials. And I don't particularly want to do that, but at the same time, as I've stated, there's just a growing disinterest in this tall bench. So as I said, one of the ideas that I was thinking about, or have been thinking about maybe for the last week, is that do a sawhorse workbench, and I have been looking at more of a Japanese style sawhorse bench. There's not actually a lot of information on this type of bench. There's bits and bobs scattered around the internet, and basically it's two Japanese sawhorses which are quite stout sawhorses, or at least the examples I've seen, very, very stout. It looks like you could literally like put a car on top of them, that stout. Basically, you've got the two sawhorses and you're basically putting some type of board on top of it, or a slab. I have seen boards and I have seen slabs. I think there's a bit of a Japanese woodworker. I think he's an American guy. I think he's been in and out of fine woodworking. I think he's been featured a number of times in fine woodworking or popular woodworking magazines like that. For the life of us, I can't remember his name. But I do think he just works off two boards and a couple of Japanese sawhorses. So I did think about doing something like that, but admittedly, I do prefer to have a thicker top, a bit of a slab top. So the last bench that I made, sawhorse bench that is, it was just laminated birch ply. I think it was like 1/2 inch, that's all I could get my hands on at the time. So I think it was 5 sheets of birch ply just glued up, laminated, you know, and it was a nice weight. It did do the trick. The thing was, when I got this, or rather when I made this shed, I didn't really have the room to have, you know, a number of benches in here, which is why this one looks so shabby, because this poor little guy, my Roman workbench, got shoved outside, and it's basically been outside all winter. There is a Roman workbench behind the camera. That's the one that got looked after. That's my favourite one. That's the Roman workbench where I feel I kind of got the closest to like perfection for me. Like, you know, the best positions of the holes, the fact that it's kind of can be used as a shave horse, the weight of it, the splay of the legs, the stability of the bench, the length of the bench. That's probably the closest I've gotten. So, and that is the oak one. So for those of you that are interested, there's a free ebook, no sign up, nothing like that. Click the link, download it or read it online. There's no sign up, anything like that. If you are interested, there's a guide to make it, and there is free plans. So, you know, knock yourselves out if you just want to go and have a look at that. So with this poor little guy having to be outside, and there's actually another Roman workbench that got left outside as well. There was the sawhorse workbench that I gave to my brother. So there is room for improvement on that sawhorse workbench, and I could probably go and ask him for it back, but I'm not going to, because as I said, I could improve on that. So I'm not sure what to do. I'm not sure whether to go down the Japanese route and kind of build another sawhorse workbench, or build some sort of maybe a rebuild bench, something like that, where I've got access to the underside. One of the things about the sawhorse workbench that I'm not going to like is that I'm not going to be able to move it. This currently is on casters, and it moves around nice and easy, as you can see if you're watching this. It's very, very easy to move around. Given that I don't tend to move it around a lot, it basically ends up where the Roman workbenches, again, if you're watching this, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. It basically ends up where the Roman workbench is. I've got access to all of my saws, my tools on the wall. Sometimes I've got to walk around and get access to these shelving boxes, and, you know, access me planes and whatever else I've got stored on there. But pretty much it does just stay there. So I kind of was thinking maybe I could get away, you know, with a sawhorse type of build. You know, it would be cool to build one. I do like to tinker about with things like that. But again, I don't just want to kind of build something for the sake of building it and then not really want to use it. So I'm in a very, how can I put it, a very catch-22 situation, because I love the Roman workbench and I'd rather just work on one of these, but as I said, with back issues, I kind of can't full time. And although I don't particularly think this is a bad bench, I'm just really becoming disinterested with using it, and I'm not enjoying using it, which again is an issue. What would you guys do? Would you persevere with this bench? Would you build a rebuild bench? Would you build a sawhorse workbench? Or would you perhaps explore something else? I'm not entirely sure what else I could explore. There probably is some things I could explore, maybe just using sawhorses altogether and no bench top, maybe. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, so leave a comment, let us know what you guys would do. I think I'm going to wrap it up there for today, guys. So until the next time, I shall see and speak to you guys later.